wait here for just a few more minutes. I'm sending links to our LinkedIn and our YouTube and also the rest of the Collectiv Academy schedule. So you should definitely check out the schedule. We have a ton of awesome Power BI, Power Platform, and FP&A sessions coming up. Thank you everyone for joining. We will get started very soon here. Welcome to Collectiv Academy. I have sent a survey in the chat for anyone that hasn't taken that yet. We will go over those results very soon. So if you could please take that quickly so we can know what you would like to learn about today, that would be great.
And I see some friends of mine here. I see Jehoshaphat. Hey, Jehoshaphat. Good morning, Michael. How are you? There's Nicole, Lindley. Wow, we got a lot of good people in here. This is awesome. We got good people in the house today.
Yeah, we'll get started here in another couple minutes. Okay, since today's session's gonna need as much time as we can, I'm gonna go ahead and kick things off. Good morning, everybody. My name is Greg. I am a principal here at Collectiv. We're excited that you all have joined us today at one of our Collectiv Academy events where we're going to be showing you how to create a Power BI report from start to finish with the one and only Jessica Jolly. I'll be doing a quick introduction to her here in a minute. But before we actually go into that, just wanted to again say thanks to everyone who's joined today. If this is your first event, welcome. If you've been here before, thanks again for showing up. Again, we have these Collectiv Academy events every Thursday at 9 a.m. Central Time. So before we
Hey, Greg, I think you're muted.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that. I was like, oh my goodness, is this me?
So we will start over.
Yeah, right.
All right. Okay, thanks everyone. Thanks everyone for joining today. My name is Greg. I'm a principal here at Collectiv. We're excited to be showing you the Collectiv Academy session of how to create a Power BI report from start to finish. If this is your first Collectiv Academy event, welcome. If you've been to one before, thanks again for showing up. We have these every week on a Thursday at 9 a.m. Central Time. Today, we're excited to be showing you today's session is going to be led by Jessica Jolly. I'll be doing a quick introduction to her after this quick intro. But that said,
Uh-oh. Greg, you went off again.
You did again.
Somehow I keep getting muted. So we'll get through this quickly and then I'll hand it over so we have no more technical difficulties. anyways, we are just a little bit about Collectiv. We are a strategy and consulting firm that focuses in data analytics, FP&A, AI, and ML. We have consultants located all across the US and some in Canada as well. We help organizations in the Power Platform, and that's Power BI, Power Apps, and Power Automate, as well as some of the other surrounding Azure services. So anything in Azure that allows you to store your data, anything that allows you to move your data, transform your data using tools like Azure Data Factory, Azure Databricks, etc. We help organizations from strategy to implementation all the way to support. Strategy meaning more along the lines of, how do you actually implement Power BI or these different tools throughout your organization? How do you apply data governance? Implementation meaning, how do we actually build reports? We help you actually build the reports that you're looking to actually implement inside your organization, like financial reporting, P&Ls, sales analysis, inventory reporting, and then all the way to project support. So after that report is actually put into production, how do you support it? How do you maintain that report moving forward? So we can help you in all of those different ways as well. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and now turn it over to Jessica, who's going to show us a great presentation today on how to create a Power BI report from start to finish. So again, thanks to everyone joining the call, and thank you, Jessica, for doing the presentation for us today.
Oh, I'm super delighted. Oops, we got an echo here.
I'm going to end my slideshow and hand it over.
All right, well, welcome everybody. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, so just bear with me while I get myself teed up here, because we all know how that goes. We want to get that organized and ready to go before I start showing things. First, what I want to do is say welcome. Delighted you're here today. You're about to have a whirlwind tour. And now I'm going to go share my screen because I've got it all ready to go. No, I think I was sharing my screen. Wait a minute. Hold on, guys. This part is always the trickiest part, where you're just trying to figure out, what am I doing? Okay, so you should be seeing beautiful mountains. Is that what you're seeing right this minute? Audrey, Chloe?
Yep, we can see the mountains.
Good. That's what I wanted to hear. You can see the beautiful mountains. Okay, so just take a moment to enjoy the beautiful mountains. And I am going to go ahead and put my slideshow into slideshow mode, and we'll get started. Here we go. Okay, so now you should be seeing a slide called From Report to Dashboard, the Tour. All right, well, welcome everybody. Let me quickly introduce myself. I know some of you guys on this call, so that is great. But for those of you I don't know, as Greg said, my name is Jessica Jolly, and I have been in the Power BI space for about 5 years. So this is the second career for me, and I used to work for a very large multinational company and loved every minute of it, but they moved their operations and they said to me, well, the job is now in India. So if you'd like the job in India, which, by the way, even though I know the news coming out of India right now is terrible, I would have jumped at. My husband was like, no, we're not moving to India. So I had to figure out what else I was going to do. And I had been training people on Microsoft Office at my local library on a pro bono basis, and I found out that I really enjoyed it. So one thing led to another. I became a Microsoft certified trainer and have just been all in on the Power BI space since then. That being said, I'm going to tell you guys right now, I do not know everything. I wish I could say I did know everything. And hey, don't tell that to my husband, because I do tell him that I know everything. But I don't. So if you have a contribution or something that, you'd like to speak up about, or say, hey, what about this or what about that? I am happy to hear it. I guarantee you I will learn something today in this presentation. It's just too big of a knowledge sphere for me to have a total grasp on it. And I welcome any contributions anybody else wants to make. I'm sure the people attending would also welcome that. I do. I am active on LinkedIn, so I do publish. I don't publish every week. I'm sure I should be doing that, but I am active on LinkedIn, so feel free to connect with me there. I do tweet on occasion. I don't tweet all the time, but I am there as well. And I do have a website. So again, my role at Collectiv is that I am a trainer for Collectiv. And what I do is I go into organizations that Collectiv has identified and have asked Collectiv for training. So I love doing that. That's really where that's my sweet spot. Those icons all represent a little bit about me and what I like to do. And then the pictures down at the bottom of the screen are some of the certifications that I have. So with that being said, without further ado, let's keep moving. Now, I want to make sure you guys know that I don't mind being interrupted. Okay, so if there's a question, and this also goes to Audrey and Chloe, if there's a question in the chat that I'm not seeing, just, and I can tell you I'm not looking at the chat right now, feel free to interrupt me and ask me. And if I know I'm going to cover that, I'll get there in a few minutes, or I'll say, let's hold that question for a few minutes. So please feel free to let me know if there's a question that people have. Okay. So when I was thinking about this presentation, I was thinking, what in the world can I cover here? Because this is a huge topic. And so in some ways, it's a great topic because it's an open playing field, if you will. And as I started developing my ideas, I was thinking about the Tour de France. So you're going to be seeing, lots of bicyclists throughout this presentation. And I was thinking about the different stages on the Tour de France. And so you'll see that my presentation is sort of organized into stages. The next thing that I was thinking about was, what can I present that you may not be able to get somewhere else, or you may have to work hard to be able to pull it together from other sources. Because let's face it, there's tons of stuff out there about Power BI. There's tons of excellent blogs, YouTube channels, websites, Microsoft documents. The issue is, how do you wade through that when it's not your day job to be a Power BI expert, okay? So what I thought I'd do for this training is, since I only have an hour, it's going to be easier, and I think it will be of usefulness to you. I hope it'll be of great value to you, to summarize some of the things that I have learned, both when I've been training people, as well as I, delve into Power BI. And again, remember, Power BI is my day job. So I do have to go to all the blogs and all the websites and all of the live streams and watch and take notes and so on. So what I do is sort of curate those and distill them into some principles that I think you should be thinking about as you move from building a report all the way through to publishing it and possibly, having a dashboard off of that. So this is going to be my take on that remit. And so let's get started. All right. So stage one is all about gathering your data, bringing your data together. So I'll be talking about some do's and don'ts in that space and things to consider. It's also about how you gather that data. Okay, so what techniques, what methodologies are you going to be using? So I'll talk about importing your data and why you should always be importing your data. I'll talk about what happens when you have missing data, because the reality is you will be missing data at some point. Maybe it's a calculation that is not present in the data. Maybe it's a particular column that's not present. So you have to grapple with that question. So we'll talk about that. The next thing we'll do is talk about credentials and how you're accessing the data and some pitfalls there that you really need to think about as you're preparing your report. And using parameters for flexibility. And finally, exploring incremental refresh and figuring out how that can work for you. Okay, the very first thing here is living in import. On the screen, you can see that I've got a screenshot. And by the way, I'm not doing a ton of demo here. In fact, I'm not doing any demo. And the reason for that is Doing demos will consume most of our time that we have together. So I'm going to be talking about principles and tying them back to features and functionality. But I'm not actually going to demonstrate anything right here today because that'll take too much time and we only have an hour together. All right, so this is the screen you're going to see when you are in the Power BI desktop and you are trying to get some data. So typically we're going to get some data from a database or an analysis services or some other source. Every time you are presented with the option to either import or choose direct query, you should be choosing import. 95 to 99% of the time, you should be choosing import. Import is always going to give you more performance because it's not having to go back to the source. So direct query, what that does is that allows you to connect directly to the source of the data, and you never bring any of the data in. So you can think of direct query almost as a no cache option, whereas import is a cache option. Even if you have many rows, you are still going to be better off using import in most of the cases. So one of the things that I like to do when I'm training people is simplify the decision making that they have to make so that if they end up having to choose direct query, they don't just choose it reflexively. Okay, so just know that import is always going to give you better performance. It is a better option overall, and you really should have a very real business reason to use direct query. So that's number one. Okay, so live in import. Next one is when you don't have the data you need, okay, which is going to happen to you. When you don't have the data you need, where are you going to create that data? And that is a really hard question because there isn't a hard and fast answer. However, Matthew Roach, who actually works for Microsoft, and he has a great data series, a great video series on data culture, has come up with this expression: make changes to your data as far upstream as possible and as far downstream as necessary. So what that means for you as the report creator is if you've got to add content to your data, if you can do it in the source system, great, do it in the source system. Most of us are not going to have access to the source system. So while that is ideal, it is not usually a reality for us. So the next place you're going to do it is in the Power Query Editor, which I'll talk about in a little minute here. But always be pushing that data creation place as far upstream as you can possibly do it. If, for example, your data comes in from Excel and you own the Excel file, do it in Excel if you can do it in Excel. So again, push the data creation process as far upstream as possible. Alrighty, and Audrey and Chloe, I'm assuming you'll let me know if there's anybody, dying to ask a question or something like that.
We do actually have a question.
Excellent.
Jeremy wants to know, he said, but automatic refresh is only available if you do direct query.
No, that's not true, Jeremy. Automatic refresh is available with a pro license or a premium license, and we'll actually talk about that at the end of the deck. With a pro license, you can schedule your refresh at 8 times a day. With a premium, with a data set put into a workspace in premium, you can do that up to 48 times a day. But the real point that I'm making is question yourself as to whether the people who are using this report really need the refresh of the data coming in every minute. And for example, a good use case to look at is, do they also have historical data in there? Because you could make a very strong case that if they have data that's 5 years old, and they're also asking in the same data set to see data that's 15 minutes old or 3 minutes old, there's probably a disconnect there. So, and not only that, even if you still do need to do a refresh, let's say every 5 minutes, you can use incremental refresh in order to go back and get your data every 5 minutes if you need to. So again, lots of ways to sort of work around that. But my main point is, because of the penalties you'll pay with direct query, really push back on the need for instantaneous updates is what direct query gives you, is almost instantaneous updates. And it's really a pretty limited situation where people really need instantaneous updates. Any other questions right now? Okay, I'll keep going. And oh, Audrey, did you want to say something? Nope.
No, I'm good.
Okay, good. Just keep interrupting me if there's questions. I really don't mind it.
Of course.
All right. So the next thing I want to kind of cover is your credentials and where the data source you're going to is. Now, in this particular screenshot, I'm pulling in an Excel file that's sitting on a C drive. Now, obviously, that's a really bad idea. Okay, so wherever your data source is, you want to make sure that it's available on something that other users can reach. You also want to consider what credentials you're using to get there. So for example, if this was a database, I would have a login ID and I would have a password. Well, they're probably going to change that password every couple of months. They're going to make me change it every couple of months. And when that happens, my link to that data source is going to break and I'm going to have to come in here and reset it. The more important problem is I create the report and I leave the organization. Now we have to get in here and we have to change the credentials because the report stops working because my credentials stop working. So there's lots of reasons why you want to consider what credentials you're using to get the data to bring into your report and make those as universal as you possibly can. Maybe consider a service account. So once the report has been developed, last thing you do is you go in and you change the credentials used to get the data and refresh the data and make those, turn those into a service account. That is in particular very important if you're using a developer to develop your report, because an outside developer, because that outside developer's credentials will disappear. Or even if you're using somebody internally and they're a long-term contractor. So again, don't forget about your credentials and how you are credentialing into the database, into the data source, and where the data source lives. That's an important thing to be thinking about before it breaks. All right, next one is use parameters for flexibility. So parameters are a little tricky because they can get, you do have to have a decent set of Power Query editor skills to understand and use parameters. But what I want to point out to you is they're not complex in concept. What they allow you to do is to be able to put in inputs on a dynamic basis. So the typical place that you would use a parameter, let's say, is if you wanted to set up incremental refresh. So you've heard me mention that, and I have a whole nother slide coming up on that. But what you require in order to set up an incremental refresh is you have to create the parameters in Power Query Editor. So you have to think about your parameters early on in the process. So that's why I've put this slide all the way at the beginning. Once you have those parameters, when you publish the report into the service, that's when you can input dynamic values into the parameters. But you have to have done it up front. So think about another place I've seen parameters work is when you have a selection of sources that you may be pulling data from. Some people have put the paths to those sources in a parameter. If you've ever done a data validation in Excel, this is almost exactly like a data validation. So basically you set it up so that the person clicks the drop down and they can select from a menu of options. So again, don't be intimidated by the fact that, they seem like they are out of reach. They're not. They're one step above that basic skill set in Power Query Editor. And they will really help you develop flexibility in your reports because they give you the ability to dynamically change inputs into your report. And again, the most common use case for that is incremental refresh, where you can go in and you can change the date selection that you're pulling from the data source. And don't worry if incremental refresh doesn't make any sense. I'm just about to talk about that. But the key with parameters is you got to set them up at the very beginning of the process. They can't be set up once you get over to the service. Okay, any questions, ladies? Anything?
Nope, we're all good.
Okay, great. You guys feel free, jump in with your questions. I really don't mind them. Okay, first of all, I just had to add this picture because I just love this picture. It's so bright yellow and it's so sunny, so yeah. Incremental refresh. So let's talk about what is incremental refresh. You may already be familiar with it, in which case that's great. But it is a way to not ingest all of your data at once. So let's talk about the scenario where you have, I don't know, 10 years worth of historical data, and you are using that in a report. And you publish that report and you set it up to refresh. Well, each time it refreshes, you do not want to have to pull in those 10 years of data. That's going to take longer than is necessary. It may not take very long. On the other hand, sometimes they do take a while. But you can control for that by ingesting just the variables, setting the variables so that, for example, with those parameters, and let me actually go back to this and show it to you again. I'm going to go back to this slide right here. If I have a start date and an end date parameter in Power Query Editor, so remember that's where I set those up. Then when I publish to the service and I set a refresh schedule, I can set so that I am pulling in just the slice of data that is new since the last refresh. So the first time I publish the data, it's going to be a huge, massive ingestion of data. Okay, so the first time I do it, I'm going to bring in, whatever it is, 5 years of data, 10 years of data. But after that, I am going to set up incremental refresh so that I'm only pulling in the last month, the last week, maybe the last year, whatever that increment is that just got added. So it makes your refreshes much more efficient. But it is something, again, you have to think of at the beginning of the process, which is why I've put it up here in the beginning. You can do it with a pro license. You can also do it with premium. So incremental refresh used to be restricted to the premium category, but it's not anymore. It's also in pro. So definitely, most of you, I'm sure, probably have a pro license if you're creating reports and sharing them. So definitely consider that. When you are working with your report, so you're developing your report, you're doing it for the first time. And let's pretend again that you've got 10 years worth of data. Don't work with 10 years worth of data in that first development phase. As long as you know that, let's say, a year's worth of data is a representative sample, meaning you're never going to see anything vastly different in any of the other years, and certainly no structural difference, take a subset, take a snapshot, take a piece of that and import just that piece, okay, and work with that as you're developing a report. Otherwise, what you're going to find, and I've done this, so this is why I know this one, is you're going to find that every time you add something to, let's say, the Power Query Editor and you apply the change, you're going to be wading through all of that processing. So consider, as you're developing, just taking a representative sample of the data. Maybe it's not time frame, maybe it's customers, maybe it's locations, whatever it is. So again, think about using just a small subset of the data to develop your report. And this will all help you and shorten the refresh time. Okay, let me check in with my lovely co-workers here, Chloe and Audrey. Anything?
No questions.
Okay, good. We'll keep going. All right, so that was all about gathering the data. Okay, so it was really the Power Query Editor and before the Power Query Editor. Now we're really solidly into the Power Query Editor process, and I want to talk about some things you can do to make your life easier. And once again, these have been learned the long, hard way by me. Okay, so some of these are really things that I've felt this pain. So this particular section was a fun section to write because I was going back and revisiting how painful it was when I didn't know some of these things. All right, so the first thing is to document your steps. And I'll show you a slide on what that means. I cannot overemphasize that enough. So second thing is to group them. So we'll talk about that as well. The third thing is talking about sequence of steps. So the order that you do things in the Power Query Editor can make a big difference. Weeding. Okay, so I don't know if you noticed on my little icon list, I have a little plant. Well, I'm just getting into gardening. So, of course, because I'm a newbie, I now know everything about gardening. I am, as I tell my husband, I am now a farmer. So yeah, weed your columns. So we'll talk about that. Limit the data scope. I referred to that earlier in the previous slide when I talked about taking a slice. A representative slice. So I'm going to come back and revisit that specifically. And create new content. Once again, we're going to revisit the maximum as far upstream as possible, as far downstream as necessary. And using the user interface and tweaking the M script. So let's dive right into it. Okay, so the very first thing I want to talk about here is documenting your steps. So if you've used Power Query Editor at all, you know that as you make changes to your data, so you remove columns, you remove rows, you promote rows, you split columns, you add things, all of that is being tracked in your applied steps window. And it's keeping a running list of your changes. And that is incredibly useful. Here's the catch. When you really get into a particular query, and there's a lot of work to be done in that query, you can have, I don't know, 50, 100 steps in there. And if you're trying to go back and figure out where you made a change, it can be hard. Okay, it's nice that they're there, don't get me wrong, but if you've got to go back, step back up through, 50 or 75 steps, that can be painful, and it's a time waste. So one of the things that I really strongly recommend that you do is that when you take a step, you immediately rename it. Okay, so you rename it just by right-clicking on it, and you'll get that little menu that I'm showing right there, and you rename the step. And name it something useful. Name it something that when you read back up that list, you'll be able to go, okay, that's where I did that. Okay, so again, I just can't emphasize enough how this can really save you a lot of time. So you'll see that on the left-hand side, I started from a very generic removed columns. I renamed it, and I went to a slightly less generic removed duplicate columns. Again, I would recommend being as specific as you can with the naming that you give it so that when you're tracing back a step, you can go back and go, oh, okay, that's where I filtered things out. Let me go right up there. So again, name and document your steps. If you look in this little, hello, I've lost my words here. If you look in that central box, you'll see down at the bottom, you'll see properties. You can also put in an extended description of what the step was and why you did it. And I would recommend using it because, again, if you're working through your way through a really gnarly query and there's lots of things you've had to do and lots of decisions you've had to make, I guarantee you will not remember them. So rename it and take the extra step of going down to properties and typing in some information about them because it really will save you a lot of time going forward. Next is grouping your steps. So the other mistake I made when I first started doing reports is I didn't have a methodology. So I didn't say, oh, okay, let me first do this piece of work, then let me do this piece of work, then let me do this piece of work. all I did was go, oh, okay, I see that I've got to get rid of that column. Okay, I'm going to get rid of that column. Then I do a bunch more steps. Then I would do another remove columns. So what I'd end up with is I'd end up with multiple steps doing essentially the same work, but on different columns. So it, first of all, it made my list of steps longer than they needed to be. And, it just wasn't an efficient way to process. So a much better way for you to process is think about groups of work. So for example, if you need to rename some columns, do it all in one step. If you need to duplicate some columns, do that all in one step. If you need to remove columns, do that all in one step. First of all, as I said, it'll keep your list shorter and it'll be easier for you to troubleshoot. So let me talk a little bit about troubleshooting now. So on your screen right now, you see on the right-hand side, you see the M script for the removed duplicate columns step. Okay, now if you're not familiar with M, that's the language the Power Query editor uses. You can really get very far in report creation without knowing a word of M. Okay, however, I would recommend that as you are working in Power Query editor, you keep the formula bar open and as you're doing your steps, because you can keep an eyeball on the M that is generated. So it's automatically generating the command. You don't have to write it, but you can look at it and you can start to piece together patterns. So if you look really carefully at this one, you'll see that I have a command called table remove columns. And then I've got, some stuff inside the parentheses there. But here are all of the column names that I deleted. Okay, so each one of those arrows is pointing to the name of a column that was removed. If I want to go back and add a column back in, all I have to do is take it off this list. And I'll do that in 1 second. I'll show you what that looks like. So if I wanted to add a column back in, all I'd have to do is take it off this list, because remember, this list reflects removal. If I wanted to remove a different column that's not on this list, all I have to do is click my cursor in here and remove the column by typing its name. So again, working inside the steps, especially when they are all consolidated into one step, is going to make it much easier for you to troubleshoot later on and fix, or correct things that you've realized needed to be corrected. So group your steps. Do all of the like work in one step as much as you can. And if you've forgotten something, if you forgot to duplicate a column or you forgot to rename a column, all you have to do is go back and edit the step. You don't actually have to go back and do another step. The sequence matters here. So once again, I'm telling you these hard-won things from my own painful past where I did not realize these things. It matters what order you do things in the Power Query editor. And the reason it matters is there is this thing, and you may have seen or heard reference to it, and it's called query folding. Now, you might be like, oh my God, that's just a bridge too far for me. Well, here's the only thing you really need to know about query folding is all it's doing is it's referring to the fact that as much as possible, when you are putting a step into the Power Query editor, you want that work, the process of doing that work, whatever that work was, whether it was removing a duplicate columns or renaming things or whatever it is, you want that the CPU power to do that coming from the source system. So what it says is, hey, I want you to fold this query back over to the source system and let it do the actual processing and return me the results. Why is this good? Because typically, if you're going back to the source system, most of them have much bigger CPUs, much greater whatever it is that they need, RAM or whatever the configuration is. It's almost always going to be better for you to have query folding happening. Now, you don't get to choose what kind of query folding there is. It's just a step that you do either has query folding or it doesn't. But here's the reason why the sequence matters. Because if you do a step and you do a step that breaks the folding, and all that means is that particular step cannot be done in the source system. It has to be done locally. As soon as you have that step in there, every other step beneath it is not going to be able to do query folding. Even if it could do query folding, it will not be able to do query folding because you broke the chain, so to speak. So for me, the way I remember query folding is, that Fleetwood Mac song, Never Break the Chain. Okay, so again, the sequence of how you do things matters. And I actually have highlighted one that I learned, I don't know, maybe 2 months ago. If you look at your query editor, you will always see change type. Every time you make a change in your query editor, or not every time, but a lot of times you make a change in the query, you're going to see change type. You should make a practice of deleting those change type steps. They are not necessary until the very end, and you put them in at the very end. Okay, so again, there's several reasons for doing that. One of them has to do with query folding. One of them has to do with hard coding. Change type actually hard codes the name of the column in there, which you don't necessarily want. So again, the takeaway for you is it matters what sequence you use. And if you're interested in learning more, you probably need to go and read or watch a video on query folding, because bottom line is query folding, good. Breaking query folding, not great. So you want to break it as low as possible on the chain as possible. Okay, so in this one, you can see I removed the change type. So you just take that step out, and then when you get to the very end, then you go through and you check all the types for your data columns and make sure that they are all accurate. Okay, any questions, Chloe, Olivia, Audrey? I don't know where I came up with Olivia. Audrey.
Nope, we're all set for now.
Okay, good. All right, I'll keep moving. All right, so we talked about the importance of weeding your columns. And I was teaching a class the other day, and what really came across to me is that this is a very risk tolerant environment. And what I mean by that is, if you are an aggressive leader, so you go through and you say, I don't need this column, 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 and you apply those changes, and those, only the columns you selected go over into your data model. If you've made a mistake, it's easy to fix. It's really a very fault tolerant environment. So what I mean by that is, if you take a look at the screen, this is that same M step that we were looking at earlier, and notice that it starts with table remove columns over on the left-hand side. So that means that anything that's in that list is going to get removed. Well, what if I decide that, oops, that was a mistake. I don't want to remove quantity 4. I meant to keep that column. All I have to do is select it, backspace over it, get rid of it, and boom, it's back into it. I have the column back, and you'll notice that it's not in the M script anymore. So again, I think it's really important to realize that this is a very risk tolerant environment. So lead aggressively. If you realize, oh my goodness, I really needed that column, you can always go back and get it. It is, and especially if you've grouped your steps, it's going to be very easy to go find that step and add the column back, or type the column name in whichever step you used. Okay, so it's just a matter of clicking into the formula bar and typing the name of the column in, or deleting the name of the column, depending on what you're trying to do. So this is a very fault tolerant system. So the next thing is limit your data scope. So we kind of talked about this with incremental refresh. Remember, as long as you've got a subset of the data that is representative, you don't have to work with 1,000,000 rows. You can work with 1,000 rows. If you're confident that those 1,000 rows represent the entire data set, that's really what you need to create your model with. Okay, and then if you create parameters, then you can go back in and set the parameters so that it will pull in all of the data. So in this example, you can see that I'm using the filter button up there in the upper right-hand corner. And I'm going to select only dates that are between, whatever, the 1st of January, 1996 and, June 30th, 1996 or whatever. I'm going to work with that subset of the data. And then once I bring it up and I publish it, I will expand those parameters by using I will expand that range by using my parameters. Here's the one key I will say about this. You got to be careful. When you use filter here, this does limit the data that's going into the model. So just be aware that when you're filtering in the Power Query Editor, that those rows that you're taking out, they are not going to the data model. As long as that's your intention, it's fine. Okay, but again, it's just something to be aware of. I got caught by that a couple times. Okay. Create new content. We've talked about this already. As far upstream as possible. We've already talked about the fact that a source system is usually not available to us. So we have to do it as far downstream as necessary. And oftentimes that's going to be in the Power Query Editor. So this is a good place to think about what kind of content do I need. The Power Query Editor is incredibly flexible and allows you to create based on if statements and all kinds of things. You can do calculations in there. So again, it is an incredibly flexible tool, and it's a great place to create content that you might need. Okay. Use the UI, so use the user interface to generate your M script as you go along. But then once you've got it there, you can use the advanced editor tool, which I've got circled on the screen there. And that opens up all of the M for that particular query. And you can come in and you can tweak the M to be maybe more flexible, or you want to have you want to fix some tables that you've taken out, or some columns you've taken out, or some columns you've added, whatever it is you want to do. You can tweak it in the advanced editor. I wouldn't set yourself a goal of learning how to write M right off the bat. Okay, maybe eventually you get to that point, but the truth is you can do 95% of what you need to do using the user interface in the Power Query Editor. So use the user interface, then come into the advanced editor and look at the M and tweak the M, as needed. Okay, I'm going to move to the next section. Questions? Anybody? Chloe?
No, you're good.
Okay, good. All right. The next one is designing for performance. Okay, so again, report design. So now we're at the report phase. Report design is an art form. It's a science. It's a whole bunch of things. So once again, when I was thinking about my lessons learned and things that I've emphasized in training over the years, I've come up with a few that I wanted to go over here. By no means is this everything that could be said about a report. Trust me, we would be here for weeks upon weeks, okay? But the first thing is slice or filter. Consider your user. You are not a painter, so that sometimes comes as a revelation to people who are building reports. Keep maintenance in mind, and preview thoughtfully, and vet custom visuals, and consider doing a data model only. So we're going to take each one of these in turn. So slicer or filter. This is always a question I get when I'm training. Do I want to use a filter? Do I want to use a slicer? So there isn't one perfect answer. A slicer is always going to be easier for your user to use. It's more intuitive. They get it. They know what they're supposed to do. Okay, they will be much more self-sufficient when they're using your report. A slicer also takes up report canvas space. So it is a design consideration. Filters, meaning on the filter pane, are much more powerful. They allow you to do things like have and or. You can choose is blank, is not blank, between, top, end. There's lots you can do in the filter pane that those options are no way available to you in a slicer. But the downside is the user has to be comfortable opening that filter pane and knowing how to navigate in that filter pane, and it can get very busy. So again, slicing versus filtering are really decisions you need to make with the user community in mind. And there are also performance considerations with slicers and filters. in some way, there are techniques that you can use if you use the filter pane that can improve the performance of your report. So if you've got a slow performing report, if you choose to put everything on a filter pane and you close that filter pane, then that is a technique that can be used because it's not sending a query back to the engine unless and until somebody opens the filter pane. So again, there are nuances to each of these. There is no one right decision. But be thoughtful about what you're choosing and be able to explain why you're using one or the other in a particular situation. On the subject of considering your user, the one thing I think you want to know right away is there data that they are using most often? So if I'm designing a report and I've got users who are looking at the United States data most often, and I've got other countries in there, I would probably go in there and I'd put the filters for the country on the filter pane. I'd set it to the US and I'd close that filter pane. Because what that means is when they open that report and they look, they'll see the US data on the report, and they are not sending a query back to the engine unless and until they open up that filter pane and choose a different country. So again, think about what are they going to be accessing? How much can you set up in advance for them so that they don't have to do a lot of, click, 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 click. The other thing you can consider is think about using bookmarks, which are essentially snapshots or saved views. So if you know that your users look at US, Canada, and Mexico, consider setting up a bookmark for each of those and then tying those to like a button. Because then, once again, you've simplified the user experience, and they could always open up the filter pane, but they don't have to. So if they wanted to get to a country other than United States, Mexico, or Canada, they could open up the filter pane. Other than that, they could just click the button that says US or Canada or Mexico, and then they'll see that data. And hold on, I thought I had one more thing on consider your user, but wait, let me see. Oh, accessibility. Do not forget about accessibility. And if you plan to make your report accessible, you need to plan a fair amount of time for that process. Each visual has to be looked at and changes made to each visual. So again, if you are planning to make your reports accessible, you have to factor in additional time for that to happen. It doesn't happen in a day, I can promise you. And there isn't a simple, quick way to do it. Okay. You are not a painter. So what I mean by that is, if your company has a PowerPoint slide template, you should give consideration into creating a Power BI template file where the colors are picked, the fonts are picked, the backgrounds are picked, because otherwise you're going to find yourself, first of all, looking at a lot of visual chaos in the reports because everybody's using different colors. And you're going to find yourself with different selections that people have made. So again, standardize, standardize, standardize. People don't have time, even though that might be the way they want to spend their time. They don't have time to be picking colors and oh, I like that purple and green combination. That should be done centrally and distributed, or at least it should be a goal that is done. Okay. Keeping maintenance in mind, lots of companies tend to outsource the report development process, and there's good reasons to do that because it is a skill set. It is a non-trivial skill set. However, you should work closely with the developers to make sure that whatever report they generate is also maintainable if you are planning to maintain it internally. And you might want to even ask them to provide your in-house users some training on that. So, and hey, guess what? Collectiv can do both. So, yeah, just saying. But again, whoever you're working with, don't have a report that has so many whiz-bang features that you can't maintain it. You don't have the skill sets in-house to maintain that report. So again, keep maintenance in mind as you are building the report. Review thoughtfully. So most of us know that Power BI is being refreshed, updated all the time. So definitely decide how you're going to use the preview features and which ones you're going to use. Do not be random about it, because you do not, remember, Microsoft does not stand by these features in support until they're released for general release. So you do not want to use a preview feature in production unless you've made it a considered decision that you are doing that. If you've decided that it's a risk you're going to take, that's no problem, but you need to decide that. And vet custom visuals. Custom visuals are great, love them. Some really cool ones out there. Some can pose security risks. So you probably want to think about what's your policy, which ones will you approve. There are some certified ones that people can use. They, I'm sure, pose much less of a risk, but you want to have a policy about those. Data model only. Consider just creating a report that just has a data model. As we'll see in the final slides, that's a really viable option going forward. So don't think about necessarily having reports and all the visuals and all that kind of stuff developed. Think about, can we work on developing a really good data model that people can then use to build their own reports? So again, as you're thinking about report creation, do not forget that you can just create the data model. There is no law that says you have to have visuals on every page. Okay, any questions? Because I'm going to slam through the rest of these slides because I know we're almost at the hour. Audrey, Chloe, anything?
Yeah, we actually have a question. How will I know if the custom visual is certified or not? Will it state that?
It does. It says it in the, when you go out to the custom visual, there's a list of Power BI certified ones, and you can choose from those. And like I said, those are probably pretty safe. I mean, I'm not just saying custom visuals. I just think you ought to be aware that there could be a security risk with them, and you just want to be sure that you've thought about that. All right. Any other questions? Okay, we're going to slam through the rest of these. So the last piece of this is thinking about your workflow. So think about publication schedules. Think about the purpose of your workspace. Who is your app, if you have one in the workspace, intended for? Think about version control, golden data sets, and refreshing appropriately. So I'm going to get through these, lickety split. So the best practice for report development is to do it in the desktop. But if I develop a report in the desktop and I publish it to the service, and then you come in, you're both members of the workspace, you come in and you edit my report in the workspace, if I publish another version of that report, it overwrites your changes. So it is something you want to think about. How are you going to cadence that? How are you going to control for that? So again, be very clear in your organization. When a report is published, who's going to edit it? How is it going to be edited? And when is it going to be edited? So that's number one in terms of thinking about. Okay, workspace purposes. Now that Power BI integrates with Teams and it integrates with, so fully with Teams, it's integrated with SharePoint, you really need to think about, what is the purpose of the workspace? What are you going to be doing there? Because now, in true Microsoft fashion, they've given you dozens of choices here. So be thoughtful about it, and also be very conversant with the different layers of membership that each workspace has, because that drives who can do what in the workspace. So again, before you just willy-nilly create a workspace, really take into consideration and articulate what is the purpose of that workspace. What are you going to be doing there? What are you going to be doing in Teams? What are you going to be doing in SharePoint? Along those same lines, when you create the workspace, be careful about audience, because remember, your workspace can only have one app. So if you've got a situation, let's say you're a finance department and you have an app, and you have your target audience for your app is your senior leadership team, you can't also publish, more generic data for a broader audience. You can only do one thing. So be sure about what that app is going to serve. Version control. Power BI is not good at version control. So you need to think about version control. It's something that comes up all the time, and it's something that you need to think about as an organization. What techniques are you going to use? It doesn't natively do it. Golden data sets. This is the new holy grail for everybody. The idea that you can publish a data model, which I talked about earlier, and then other people can use that data model to develop reports. Very, very powerful. And so you should really be thinking about how much of this can we start doing, because it eliminates work. And finally, refresh appropriately. So I talked at the very beginning about incremental refresh. Know what your options are. Do you need to refresh, every 8 times a day? Do you need to refresh 48 times a day? Do you basically need to refresh continuously? And really dig deep into the users and understand really what their business requirements are, because you might be surprised how you can go with a much less intense refresh schedule. Whew, okay, it's 11 a.m. and that was it. I am happy to stay on and answer questions, but I just wanted to make sure. I know people have to drop off, so I want to make sure I got through my slides, but I'm happy to stay.
We've got another question from Jeremy. He'd like to know,
yes,
how can I code a custom visual and save as a PBIV file?
I'm sorry, how do I do that?
Yes, how can I code a custom visual?
Ooh, that I do not have an answer for. So I don't know if you guys take, I've never dealt with anybody who has created a custom visual. So I'm sorry, Jeremy, I don't know the answer to that. So it's an excellent question. I don't know if Greg knows the answer to that. I've never done one. Other questions, Audrey? Chloe?
It looks like there are no more questions in the chat. Feel free to send them if you guys have any more. But as a quick reminder, you guys will be receiving an email after the meeting with a link to the recorded session in case you missed anything or would like to rewatch.
Great. Well, thank you guys for coming. I appreciate it, and I really appreciate the questions. I love getting questions in my talks because it just keeps me on my toes. All righty. Anything else? All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and end the slideshow. I'm happy to stay on if anybody has any questions. Okay, Audrey and Chloe, do you need anything else? Oh, wait, there was a question here. I see a question. Hold on. There's a question. Sudana, you have a question about, can I elaborate between import data and direct query? Yes, Sudana, absolutely can. So here's the deal. When you do direct query, what you're doing is you're setting up a direct connection back to the data source. It is going to be a live connection that stays open. And as Jeremy alluded to when he asked the question, the reason people like that is because you, in theory, can get the data at the latest data to the minute, let's say, to the second. Okay, so the problem with that is, one, you are going to impact your report's performance, because essentially what has to happen is every time you query, like you have a visual and you click on something in the visual, that query is going back to the data source. It is not cached, locally, and that's going to be a problem in terms of performance. So direct query is really, really discouraged. It's not that it shouldn't be used ever. There are times when that's what you have to have, but it is not something that should be your default. You should be pushing hard for import on a regular basis. So I don't know if that helped, Sudana. Please let me know. And Jeremy has another question. Yes. So can everyone, oh, good, look at the questions. This is awesome. So Jeremy, can everyone in a company who has an E5 Microsoft license view Power BI? Yes. So Jeremy, E5s include The Power BI license. So absolutely, it is by default included. If someone has an E3, then they would have to add on the Pro license. So you'd have to pay an additional $10 a month, unless your organization had a premium license as well. But yes, if you've got E5, you have the ability to use Power BI, create reports, everything. So hopefully it helps you. And I'm glad I was able to answer one of your questions. Okay, now Sherry's got a question. If all the visuals are graph type, can a visual display like P&L or balance sheet stuff? You know, my answer to that is absolutely. But I don't know if Greg is Greg still here or did he leave? Looks like he left. But yes, Sherry, I am quite positive that there are visuals that can do that job. Because there's a huge range of visuals. And I actually know that Collectiv, that's kind of their bread and butter, is doing financial reporting. So, you know, I don't know, Chloe and Olivia, you may want to pick up Olivia. Wow, did I get Olivia in my head here? Audrey, you may want to pick up that question from Sherry because I'm pretty sure it can do that. Other questions? Okay, great. Okay, Sherry's going to ask next week. Yay, okay. All right, well, I hope everybody enjoyed it. Oh, good. Okay, wait it. So when you import data, it stays in memory. Yes, it's cached into memory. It absolutely it's cached as a copy, basically. And you want that because it's going to improve the speed of your report. Once you publish it up into the service, then you can set up a refresh schedule and it will refresh. So you don't have to worry about working with stale data. Okay, if your data is perishable, meaning it does need to be refreshed, then yes, you can set up the refresh schedule once you get up into the service. So yes, when you import the data, it's in a cache. It's in a cache on the machine. Yes, Sudana. And Jeremy, yeah, she might be talking about the matrix or the table visual, but I feel like there's lots of visuals that address financial stuff. So I'm really quite confident that that is a rich arena for things. It looks like, Chloe, you're going to say something?
Oh, no.
Okay, nope, Chloe wasn't going to say anything. Yeah, Sherry, maybe when you come, if you're back next week, I don't know what the topic is next week, but if Greg is on, I'm quite sure he could answer that question right off the top of his head. All right, any other questions? Okay, Sedona, thank you. Super happy you were here. Super happy you asked questions. Jeremy, thank you. Sherry, thank you. All right, I think we've exhausted the questions, ladies.
Great. Thank you so much, Jessica.
Oh, it was my pleasure. I enjoy doing these. Alrighty, well, I'm gonna hang up then if there's nothing else.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you. Thanks,
Okay.
everybody. Watch out for the
Bye, guys. Thank you. Bye.